On one occasion, the government has been accused of rigging the process, and now the government is being accused of not rigging the process to make sure the vessels can go to Fergusons. I think this just demonstrates that Russell Findlay is scraping the bottom of the barrel of political insults. He does it week on week in this Parliament, and it's a disgrace to the Conservative Party.
Russell Findlay.
No. Sorry, John. We don't want the SNP to fix contracts.
Mr. Findlay, I'm sure, Mr. Findlay, that you know we do not use simply first names in this chamber.
Forgive me. Sorry, First Minister. We don't want the SNP to fix contracts for Fergusons. We want them to fix Fergusons so that they can win contracts fairly and squarely. Because Scottish shipyards should be able to build ferries here in Scotland. After nationalisation, the SNP had a duty to get Fergusons back into a position to win contracts legitimately, and they have failed to do so. Yes. SNP politicians want all the credits when they're grabbing headlines and launching a ferry with painted-on windows, but they never, ever accept responsibility for what's gone wrong. And the First Minister's fingerprints are all over this scandal from the very beginning. He signed off on a dodgy deal that's let down islanders, taxpayers and shipyard workers who face an uncertain future. Scotland was once world-leading in shipbuilding, and now we're losing CalMac ferry contracts to Poland. So how can anyone trust John Swinney to repair the damage at Fergusons when he caused it in the first place?
Anas Sarwar.
With the SNP, it's contracts going abroad. This week, it's jobs for Poland. 4 years ago, it was jobs for Turkey. So much for Stronger for Scotland. It's the SNP stronger for Poland, the SNP stronger for Turkey. I want the ferries to be built here in Scotland.
Let's hear Mr. Sarwar.
I want the jobs. I want the ferries to be built here in Scotland. I want the investment to be here in Scotland. I want the jobs to be here in Scotland. We have world-leading shipbuilders at Port Glasgow, Govan and Rosyth. We have a publicly owned shipbuilding company, Fergusons, we have BAE and we have Babcock. I want Scotland's shipbuilders to be able to bid and win these contracts, but John Swinney believes none of them are good enough to build Scotland's ferries. So what is it about the way SNP run Fergusons? And what is it about the way the SNP do procurement that means Scotland's ferries can't be built in Scotland?
First Minister.
I don't believe any of the guff that Mr Sarwar suggested is any of my views. Absolutely.
First Minister. Let's ensure our language is courteous and respectful.
Well, let me rephrase my question. I don't believe any of the nonsense that Mr Sarwar purported to be my view. We've gone through a competitive tendering process in which Ferguson Marine have been part of that competitive tendering process. So it follows from that I believe that yard is perfectly able to build the ships because they're part of the tendering process and they got through that tendering process to put in a bid that was credible and to be considered. But what ministers cannot do is that ministers cannot operate outside the law. We've got to follow. Well,
Mr. Mara.
We've got to follow the procurement law that is in place. We've got to follow the legislation as part of the United Kingdom Subsidy Control Act, which is an obligation on all of us to make sure that ferry tenders are determined on the basis of an open procurement process. So, whilst I would love the vessels to be built at Ferguson Marine, of course I would love that, because that's why we're putting in £14.2 million over 2 years to support Ferguson Marine develop their capability. I want that to be the case, but I've got to make sure that we procure our ferry vessels in accordance with the legislation that's in place in the United Kingdom.